Adam Toastmaster, my fellow Toastmasters and honored guest. So my icebreaker is called My Journey, which I came up with 2 minutes ago. Thank you, Eli. And I'd like to start this off by asking, who's here read and enjoyed reading Calvin and Hobbes?
Bill Watterson.
Bill Watterson, yes. Yeah. Calvin and Hobbes, I mean, that's my favorite comic strip. Technically comic strip, not a comic book. And when I was growing up, so my brother currently, he's a comic book creator. And so throughout our childhood, he's amassed this large collection of comic books. So I've read Marvel, I've read DC, I've read Spawn, I've read indie comics, but I've always found myself going back to Calvin and Hobbes, just a personal favorite. And as I've gotten older, that comic strip really resonates with me more and more. And you look at some of those quotes. One of the quotes that resonated with me was one panel, Calvin's mom tells Calvin, life could be a lot worse. To which he replied, life could be a lot better too. My personal favorite is when Calvin said, it's funny. What was the quote again? It's funny. Day by day, nothing changes. But when you look back, everything is different. And I've come a long way just to be with you all here tonight, so thank you. I was born and raised in Maryland. If you guys don't know Maryland,
Yes.
home of The Wire, which is the greatest television show ever. Cal Ripken Jr. We put Old Bay seasoning on everything, if you've seen that at your grocery store shelves. And I was there from when I was born up until I went to college. And it's funny, if you think back to when you were a kid, it's amazing how much you didn't know, right? The basic fundamentals of monthly budgeting or just daily budgeting, right, for your finances, basic fundamentals of investing. God, Pokemon cards. If I had known that they were gonna make you hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would have never touched my cards growing up. One of the more important things I wish I had learned was public speaking. And I wish it was more than just an extracurricular activity. So I was a pretty studious kid in high school, and I was pretty fortunate to secure an interview at a really top school that I had my sights on. And during this time, I was going through a phase. I had a shaved head, I had a left earring, white tees, Air Force Ones, spoken a lot of vernacular terms. But I remember showing up to this interview, and honestly, I don't know if I had a plan. I full of anxiety, couldn't clearly articulate my thoughts, convey confidence. Needless to say, I didn't get the interview or didn't get accepted to that school. I was fortunate enough to get accepted to another school in Atlanta. And so when I was in Atlanta, that was from college up until my mid-20s. And I look fondly back at this time. I was in Atlanta, I was a young adult, newfound freedom, new state where none of my family lived. I learned quite a bit of things because you have to figure out a lot of things yourself, especially when you're 18 years old. The very first thing was, you gotta look for guidance, you gotta look for help. I think back to when I was looking for a job coming out of college. Just reaching out to friends, siblings, reaching out to the Career Resource Center, reaching out to alumni to other companies. I mean, they give you nuggets and tidbits here and there. And that's really provided me dividends throughout my life. When I was in Atlanta, again, I was a young adult. I learned that buying drinks at the bar, huge waste of money. I wish I could invest that in my Pokemon cards. The last thing is the importance of networking. When I was looking for a job, that's when I learned the importance of networking. Networking is really how you separate yourself from a pool of candidates. And through a long summer of constantly networking with various individuals, various alumni, I secured job interviews at several companies I was looking to work at. And again, similar story where I go into these interviews, anxiety, not being able to articulate my thoughts, not being able to respond well to impromptu questions. And so I do think about how my trajectory could have changed if I was better at that. Though I was fortunate enough to get at least one job offer. I worked there for about 3 years and got a 3-year itch when I was in Atlanta, and I moved to Chicago. Chicago, when I look back at that time, much more of a period of stability, right? But a couple of things I learned was, first, when you move to a new city, it's really tough. It's really challenging to move to a new city. You really have to put yourself out there, make yourself vulnerable to form new social circles. Second, I lived there during the pandemic. Chicago's cold 10 months of the year. So a lot of cabin fever. And just kind of learn throughout that time, you have to learn to take care of yourself. And the last thing is, I met my wife there in Chicago and learned that she's my anchor, she's my everything, right? And it was great. We spent many years building a life there together. She's in the sports industry, and her career aspirations led her to be here in LA. So naturally, I followed her there. Now, this is during the pandemic. If you're aware, during that time, there was something called the Great Resignation, where a lot of employees were kind of re-evaluating their life. So during that time, I was interviewing with other companies. I was looking to move away from consulting. And I had, through my personal network, I had a chance to work at a very large tech firm. Same story. I got to the interview, anxiety, spoke very quickly, unable to respond to impromptu questions. Felt like I embarrassed a person that had, recommended me for that role. So it's just another opportunity I think about where things could have been different, especially when I look at the stock price of that company. So I was fortunate enough to get an offer at a different company, and that's when I moved to LA 3 years ago. LA hasn't really been, I will say that over the past 3 years, LA has brought its fair share of challenges, right? Because when I drive, I fear for my life. Yeah. Y'all are some crazy drivers. Hard to find Pokemon cards at retail price. If you've seen those Costco videos, yeah, you gotta throw some bows, right? But comes back to, I've come back to consulting since I moved to LA. And part of my role is there's a lot of client facing, but also I'm supposed to be an expert. Not supposed to be, I am an expert in my field. I do executive compensation consulting for a living. Now I can think back to a particular moment was when I was giving a presentation in San Diego in front of a room of professionals. Stuttering, voice quivering. At one time I even just stopped talking because I just lost my train of thought. And my manager had to come rescue me. So that's really why I'm here today. I'm here to cover the gaps from what I perceive in my skills, and I really focus on public speaking. So again, thank you for letting me come up here and speak with you all tonight.
Yeah, great job.
Very good job.
Wow, good. Great job. Thank you so much, Alex, for your wonderful speech. The next we are going to